see it. So I'm going to go to Display, Animation, IK Handle Size, and take my handle size up. This way I can actually see my handle. If I click on this handle and move it up and down, I'll notice now the knee bends like a real leg. The problem I still have, though, is if I move this thigh down, the whole leg still goes to the floor. I wanted it so that when I try to bend this down, that this ankle stays in place and the knee bends. The only way we can do that is create something called a controller. A controller is any object you want to choose. Either it can be a mesh, or it can even be a curve. I prefer using curves because they don't render. Polygons, you have to turn off a setting in order for it not to render. So I'm going to create a circle. I can snap the circle straight to the center of this ankle if I want to. If I just hold the letter V down and just move it, you can snap straight there. But I want a fancier controller because with a curve you can model anything you want. So I'm going to use this curve here. I want to change the way it looks, its shape. I can go into my CVs and move this however I want to. So I'm going to flatten these out a bit more. I'll hold letter J to snap. Move this up. And scale these in if I want to. This way, giving myself a slight foot type of shape. I don't care. It's technically a middle foot. It's fine. But what's important is where your pivot of this object is. This pivot currently is in the center of my curve. I want it to be exactly where the ankle is. So I can hold the letter D to move my pivot and hold the letter V to snap to my vertex. The cool thing with vertex snap is it also snaps to the center of any joint. So if I snap it over here, it snaps to the center of this joint. So now here's my new pivot. Again, that's holding the letter D, letter V, snap to ankle. And now I can move this around and it works properly. After this, you want to freeze your transforms. So whenever I move this around, I can always type the number 0 and it goes right back. I'm going to give this also a name. I'm going to call this the foot con. So it lets me know this is my foot's controller. Now, like we were talking about parenting, I'm just going to simply parent my IK to my controller. Press the letter P. Now my controller controls my ankle. See? Just moves just like before. The nice thing is because now the IK's parent is this, it has a parent to follow. So if I take this hip and move it down, that ankle stays in place. So I'm going to change this to a world transform so I can move up and down just like that. For now, the foot is just kind of following with the bend. That's fine. We'll be going over a much more complex foot setup later on where you don't have to worry about that. But for now, it covers what you need. Okay. We do have 2 legs though, so there's no point in just using one. So let's duplicate this. The way you want to duplicate this is you want to go into Window, to Hypergraph Hierarchy. This is just significantly easier to work with. So if I go over here, I'll see that I have my foot con, my IK handle, which I also rename now. I'll call this my ankle IK. I just like renaming my IK handle based on the joint it sets at. So it ends at the ankle, so I just call it ankle. You can call it foot IK if you want. It's entirely up to you. These names are not something set in stone that you have to follow. You can name it however you want. Just make sure you have a naming convention. In your quiz that you'll have on week 2, everything must be named. I do count off heavily for not having that. So if I select these 2 top ones right here, this is the parent of your chain, and this is the parent of this chain. You want to group this. Either you can press Ctrl G and go Edit, Group, which is also Ctrl G. It groups it. You can already tell by looking at the hierarchy what is a group. A group is simply an empty node where you take anything you have and basically parent those objects to this. So this is now your new parent. These are your children. These are your children's children. They just go down the chain. So this is your parent. In order to select your group inside the viewport though, you select any object, press up, and press up again. Notice how that moves up your chain. And go to my tilde here, press up. Notice how it keeps slowly moving up the chain. Now I hit my group. Now with the group selected, I'm going to move it. I'm going to my front view. I'll move it relatively where I want it to be at. Let's move this right here, where everything's generally centered. I go to Edit, Duplicate Special, Options. Reset your settings. make sure everything's reset, and all you need to do is check this box, duplicate input graph. Click that, apply, close, and put a negative value in front of your translate X. I put a negative right here, press enter, and we have 2 legs. That was pretty straightforward. The problem we're having right now is that I can't tell which one's left or right. See that? Make sure you do group before you duplicate though. So I'm going to go back to my group. I can press up. It says group 1. Go to modify, prefix hierarchy names, and I'm going to type L underscore. Okay. And now everything underneath it has an L. Why? Because I named the parent. So everything below the parent is being renamed for me. It's a pretty neat trick. So if I go back to my group, modify, prefix hierarchy names, R underscore. You might be wondering why I put right over here and left over here, because this is the character's left and this is the character's right. You don't want to name it after your own, because if you were standing behind this character, this would also be your left. This would now become your right. So you want to name it based on the character. That way it makes a little bit more sense. So now that we have that, let's create our arm. I'll go to my front view now. Animation, joint, and remember what I said before? With the arms, we always want to deal with a local orientation. So I'm going to click on X, Y, Z this time. But I want to make sure my line is perfectly straight. So I'm going to create one where for my shoulder. Find out where the pivot of that is. It's generally right here. And you also want to click it for where your wrist is. We're going to ignore the L right now. We're going to slide a joint right inside. I'm going to jump to my top view now. I'm going to move these joints back to where they're supposed to go. So I'm going to move this back here. And I'm going to rotate this to where that wrist is supposed to be. We can tell right now that the length is too short. So I'm going to scale it. Object. Scale that out a little bit. Then we'll go to modify, freeze transforms. Okay? Now that we have that, I can look at everything else. Let's try to match the angle of the arm. This makes life a little bit easier. If I look at this thing, I can look at this angle right here, and look at the angle for the actual elbow, and you can see the plane doesn't look quite like that. If I rotate this up a little bit more, this matches the actual angle of the plane that we have going across. So once you have that also, freeze your transforms again. This makes it back to 0. That way whenever I rotate anything, I can always zero everything out and it goes back to its original location. Go back to my front view. I'm going to make sure I'm in animation. I'm going to go under skeleton, insert joint tool, and you want to grab it from your parent, drag it down. This is roughly where my elbow is going to be at. So there's my elbow. We were looking at this like it doesn't look like in the center of the object. It's because this, when I modeled this character, I modeled it with the arm bent. So knowing that, I'm going to go back in here with rotation, in local, rotate this back to where it's supposed to be. Rotate this upwards. Notice I'm only using one axis, my yellow one right here. And rotate this back to where it's supposed to be in the wrist. Front view. If I look at this, might be able to rotate this down. The arm itself down. If you rotate the arm down, you have to rotate this only, see the top right here, back on the proper axis. That yellow one. I think this actually works pretty good though. Let's move that down, move this the proper axis. Rotate up, move too far, rotate this back. See, I'm just going rotating back and forth on the proper axes. That way everything just kind of matches each other properly. See that will rotate way down too far. Up. It's like fighting it a little bit all the time. Come on. This rotation is kind of annoying sometimes. Alright, it's right inside now. Now that everything's properly rotated, I'm going to right click on this parent joint, go to select hierarchy, modify, freeze transforms. Now if I create an IK handle for the shoulder to the wrist, you notice that it bends in the proper direction at that exact angle that you want. Alright, let's name some of these joints. We'll call this shoulder joint. I'm actually going to put, you got this, you can press it down. So you got elbow joint, wrist joint. Remember, this is a very basic rig, nothing fancy. I'll call this my wrist IK. I'm going to create my hand joints now. Go to my top view. I'm going to create one joint floating right here. And I'm going to create it to my middle finger first. So straight to my middle finger. And then I'm going to create it to my tip of that finger. It's not going to be proper in the beginning. So if I go to my perspective view now, you notice that where's my hand? It's at the grid. So you just simply move it all the way up here. So I'm going to press F to zoom all the way up. Let's move this up. I can make my manipulator a bit larger by pressing the plus sign. And I'm just going to rotate. I'm going to rotate everything into its place. So I'm going to rotate this down, roughly where the middle of that finger is. I'm going to take this, move it, rotate that down too, until it doesn't really match the angle of the finger. So I'm going to take this whole thing, notice how this doesn't match the angle of the hand either, rotate it so it matches the angle of the hand. You want to make sure it matches that angle nicely. Let's look at this, let's match the finger angle, it does. I'm going to rotate this down, rotate it down, rotate it back. If it doesn't meet the actual angle of the finger, keep on rotating it until it hits it. Rotate each per finger too. I'm going to scale this out because it's not long enough. Once you have the angle down, just right, I'm going to select the whole thing, select hierarchy, modify, freeze transforms, and everything goes back. So here's a neat trick I'm going to show you guys in top view. If I take this, if I press Control D, I can just simply move it to the next location. Go back here, Control D, Control D. Another one for the thumb. Place them roughly where they need to go using rotation. This way our axis is proper. Place these main knuckles though by actual movement.